Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White and this is Jason's Weird Reads, and today I am finally getting to answer the questions that everyone posed on my Q&A video to celebrate my 5,000 subscriber mark. And I want to thank everyone who asked a question, and I hope that I got everyone's question here. I think there's about 20, and taking a snapshot of all the questions was a little more difficult than I thought it would be. So if I missed anyone's questions, please just let me know in the comments and I will answer it in another video. And before I start, I just want to say that I've already decided to break this up into two. This first one here is all the basic questions that I got, and then there are some questions regarding Buddhism. There's 3 or 4 of those, and so I decided to make like a Buddhist resource video, so you can find that one is coming up either before, probably after this video. So since there's so many questions here, I don't want this video being like an hour. So let's get into it right now. First question is by Lydia from Typical Books. If you haven't subscribed to her channel, you should go do so because she creates some really awesome content. She says, "Congratulations, Jason. My question would be, do you gravitate toward Canadian authors of weird fiction, and or do you feel there is a particular Canadian flavor of weird?" And to be honest, I don't know. Sadly, I'm not very educated on Canadian weird fiction writers, but there's a couple of things, and one author I do enjoy. I really enjoy Simon Strantz's collection, Nothing is Everything. I read that, I think, in 2018 or 2017, and I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of slow burn type weird stories in there, but it's exactly the thing I enjoy reading. One thing I loved about that book, Nothing is Everything, is that the first story is really grounded in sort of the area where I grew up in, and so that was really cool to read. And I also really enjoy what Michael Kelly is doing. He's a great writer as well, but he runs Undertow Publications, and I would say they're one of the best weird fiction publishers out there right now. Everything they do is just absolutely incredible. So thank you, Lydia, for that. I wish I did know of more, but there's a lot of writers you read and you just have no idea where they're from. It's something, though, I think I should look into more. And Lydia also asked that she's also very interested in my Buddhist reads, such as Panic asked, which I'll get to her question in that video. So thank you again, Lydia. Next up, I have Cliff Murray, and he says, "Congratulations, Jason. That is truly awesome. My question is, what honest advice can you give me to grow my channel so that I can reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers?" Well, me mentioning you here is one way. Cliff Murray, go check him out. Honestly, this is a big video, or a big question, and I was debating whether or not to make a video separate on that. I've been thinking about doing a video on how to grow your booktube channel for a while, but I don't know if my advice would work at all. Because my channel, it's taken about 5 years to grow to 5,000. That's not very fast. I've had people join or become booktubers after me, like by 6 months or more, and now they're in like the 50s, 70,000 mark, and I'll probably never get there, but that's fine. Anyways, my advice. One thing I would say, and this is, I think, the biggest advice, in my opinion, is to not worry too much about your numbers. It's good to have the goal to say, I want to reach 1,000 subscribers, but there is no magic spoon that's handed to you once you reach 1,000 subscribers. My biggest advice is to just have fun making videos. If you're having fun making videos, then that shows, and people will want to see you make more videos. I think that's been the biggest thing that's helped me the most is the fact that I really enjoy sitting here in front of my messy bookshelf and talking about the books I enjoy reading with everyone. The second biggest advice I would say is make really good and catchy titles, and make really good thumbnails that pop, that want to draw people in. So you may want to consider studying marketing a little bit and how to draw the human eye towards your product. That's, I think, the two biggest things you can do. So make your content look attractive that people will want to click on, and have fun with it. Don't worry too much about subscriptions, because they're going to come regardless. But if you want it to go a little bit faster, make sure you're having fun, because like I said, people will see that. And if you're not having fun, then it's possible that this isn't for you, and you need to maybe make peace with that. All right, so thank you, Cliff. Moving on, I have a question from Leslie. It says, I know you enjoy reading and writing, but do you have any other hobbies? We can sometimes get into reading and or writing slumps. If you're feeling slumpy, do you paint, draw, run, do yoga? Well, I meditate. That's part of, I guess, a Buddhist practice. I did draw for a little while, and I painted a little bit, and I showed that stuff in earlier videos a long time ago. I'm not even too sure where they are anymore. But mostly I just read. I try to write, but I don't always get to it, and I make YouTube videos. I would say those are my biggest hobbies. I don't really count meditating as a hobby so much, because it's more of a self-growth type thing. I'm doing it for like self-care, I guess you could say. Thank you, Leslie. I wish I want to add on to this just a little bit. I wish I had more time for more hobbies, because I have so many interests, so many things I want to do. And the reason why I don't draw or paint is because I need to make, it's funny when people say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. And it's because I'm prioritizing my hobbies. So I wish I had more time where I could incorporate that into my other hobbies and just have a whole plethora of things that I do, because that would make life almost perfect. Thanks again, Leslie. All right, moving on to Z Balba. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I probably did. What's the scariest book you've ever read? Like, genuinely terrified you? I used to talk about this book a lot, but Fear Me by Tim Curran. That book is a prison story, and it genuinely gave me the creeps. Tim Curran is the only author who's actually ever been able to actually give me the creeps. I don't know why that is, but when he's not always on the mark with being scary, but when he wants to be scary, at least to me, he can do it. And like I said, not too many books have ever scared me. Horror movies scare me a lot more than horror books do. I think it's because the visuals of it in the movies, it's easier to scare people that way, I think. But books don't generally do it. But I would check out Fear Me by Tim Curran. That one scared me. Thank you for that question. Crystal from Fiber Artsy Reads, my fellow and creator of the Week of Weird that we just completed. She says, congratulations, Jason. So deserved. Thank you, Crystal. What's top on your bucket list places to travel to? Man, I have been to Great Britain, and I've been to Florida, and I've been to British Columbia. Those are the only places I've been outside of my home. And I would still love to go to, I think I'd love to go to Australia, and I would love to go to Italy. I'd love to go to Hawaii, or if not Hawaii, then the Bahamas. Pretty much those places. I don't really want to go anywhere else, but I want to go to those 3 or 4 places that I mentioned, because they all seem really beautiful, and I just want to go and look at like beautiful landscapes and be in the sun and maybe on the beach with a few drinks, and just let the time pass by, be present in those moments. Thank you, Crystal. All right, Joseph. Joseph is another long-time watcher of my videos. Thank you for that alone, Joseph. And he says, congratulations. I would love to hear your review of the book Still Life with Crows. As I am one of YouTube's biggest Preston and Child fans, I'm looking forward to the video. Well, I decided just to put it in here instead of actually recording a review of it, because when I read this book, it was like 10 years ago or more, probably more. Thinking 11 or 12 years ago. And to be honest with you, I absolutely loved Still Life with Crows. But as I said, I'm absolutely awful when it comes to reading serial books. I don't know why that is. I'll read one or two and then that's it. Especially with these books where you can almost read in out of order. And this was my first and only by Preston Child. Preston and Child. But I kept meaning to go back to read more, especially The Relic, which is the first in the series. I wanted to read that because I really enjoyed the movie, and I understand that the movie rather butchered the book, but I saw the movie in the theaters, and it gave me an adrenaline rush that I'll never forget, and I'll always hold that dear to me, no matter how good or bad the movie is. But I want to go and I want to read the whole series. But Still Life with Crows, from what I remember, was really good. I really absolutely loved it, and maybe, this question keeps reminding me that I need to go back to that series and maybe read some more books, because it's really good, and I love how dark they are. A lot of horror readers really enjoy reading these Preston and Child books, so I'm hoping to get back to them. Thank you, Joseph. Ange Bain, she is a longtime viewer, and she says, "Congratulations. How are you doing right now?" I am doing really well, and I'm assuming this is in regards to the bad year I had last year. I talked almost extensively about it, and I probably shouldn't have. I don't want to be a downer on booktube, but I tend to like to express myself on social media, whereas in real life I don't. People in my real life don't even know I'm suffering, when inside is like a whole bunch of turmoil going on. And long story short, I ended up at the end of 2021, at the end of 2021, I went off my antidepressants, and it was a mistake. I went back on them in around middle 2022, and I have to say that going back on them was a really good decision. But while I was in that sort of dark phase, 8-month period where I was off my meds, it was a dark journey that I went through, and I found Buddhism as a result, and so I started meditating as well, and that, I would say, has also helped me a lot. So thank you for asking that. And she also asks, what have you been doing, or have you been doing any writing, and what book inspired your love of horror? I have not been writing as much as I'd like, because I like reading and making YouTube videos, and that takes up a lot of my time. I'm hoping to be able to I have some ideas of what I want to accomplish, and so I'm hoping to be able to get to that very shortly. And the book that inspired my love of reading horror, I would have to say, is actually not a horror book per se, but that was Swan Song. I read that way back when I was like 14 years old, and it absolutely blew my socks off. And there's some horror elements in Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon that led me to reading horror books, and I loved that book so much, I went and read all of Robert McCammon's books that were out at the time, and he primarily back then wrote horror. Swan Song was a bit of a branch off, and then that led me to Dean Koontz and Stephen King, and that book also, Swan Song, it not only exploded my love of reading, it also made me want to become a writer myself. I just wanted to be able to create a world so seemingly, at the time when I was 14, realistic and brutal and also beautiful. So Swan Song was a huge book for me back then, and it still is, in a sense. I want to reread it just to see where it stands now, but I'm afraid to reread it because what if I hate it now? Then that's like a pillar of my life that I no longer like. I think I'll always remember it as something that changed my life, a book that changed my life, whether I like it now or not. Although I'm pretty sure I'd like it now. I've read it like 3 or 4 times, but it's been about 20 years since I read it last. Thank you, Ange Bain. All right, GK Reads, I hope I pronounced that right. Congratulations, I'm still reading through the Week of Weird-a-thon book. You know what, it took me a long time to go through. My week of weird turned into like 3 weeks. So question number one, how are you doing? Again, I think this is in reference to my bad year, which was 2022, my bad mental health year. And again, I'm doing really great. Thank you for asking. And number 2, actually, I want to add something. You know, nothing is permanent in life. I can easily go back down. I can make bad decisions, go off my meds again. But right now, things are good, and I'm happy that they're good. But you know, you don't even need to go off your meds for your mental health to decline. And I'm prepared this time, I hope, if that happens again. Question number 2: have there been any books you found to be not worth the hype around them? Oh man, you know, this is a tough question to answer because I have read books like that, and I can't think of any right now. Okay, you know what? I'm going to answer this question with, it just hit me. It's a book that everyone, especially in the fantasy realm, seemed to love, and I might catch some flack for this, but The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, I don't get the hype for it. I read it twice, well, 1.5 times. The first time I DNF'd it. I enjoyed it enough. I don't hate the book at all, but I don't understand the love for it. It drags on way too long, way longer than it has to. It's like 1,300 pages long. It could have easily been 700 pages. The characters, I enjoyed the characters, but I think he paid too much attention. There's too much attention to one of the characters, the male character. I can't remember his name. The main male hero who is captured and made into a slave, and he becomes one of the bridge builders in the army, which is a very brutal thing to be. I don't understand why everyone enjoyed his story so much. I enjoyed the young girl's story. It was more interesting. She was more of a bookworm, and she was doing all this studying and stuff. But her storyline was way more. It was overlooked, honestly. I heard the second book, which I haven't gotten to yet, deals mostly with her. But that would be my answer. I've never heard anyone speak poorly of The Way of Kings. But it's not that I didn't like it, because I like it enough, but it just went on and on and on. It didn't want to end, and that was not in a good way. So that's my answer for that, and I hope I didn't piss anyone off too badly with that. All right, The Archive. He says, congratulations, Jason. Thank you. My question is, if you could have a dinner party with any 5 authors/characters, who would it be and why? Dead or alive? Well, honestly, Stephen King would have to be on there, and Robert R. McCammon. I'd like to have dinner with H.P. Lovecraft, because I'd like to have a talk with that guy. I would like to say, I know you grew up in very different circumstances, and that your aunts and your grandfather were horribly racist, but you don't have to adapt their mindsets. There's a bigger world out there, Mr. H.P. Lovecraft. Please, tone it down. So that's 3. Who else? I'd love to talk with Tim Curran, have a dinner with Tim Curran as well, because nobody creates monsters like he does. He is a master at creating monsters, especially when he's on his game, because he's written a lot of books, and not all the books have been hits for me, but the ones that have been hits for me are like incredible. And number 5, man, I don't know who I would ask. I don't know, man. I'm going to have to leave it at 4 because I cannot come up with a 4th or a 5th author even. All right, so thank you, Archive, for asking that. It was a great question, and I failed. I failed horribly. Dip the Guitarist asks, congrats, Jason. Thank you. My question, Dip the Guitarist had a different name before he recently changed his name, but he's been a long time viewer, so thank you for that as well. His question is, which are some of your favorite books that you've read because of booktube, and who are the booktubers who recommended them? Well, I can tell you that Rachel from the Shades of Orange has recommended to me a lot of books that I've absolutely loved, Kill River being a big one. I remember Rachel and me and a couple other people did a summertime readathon once that involved Kill River and Kill River 2. I think I read both those books for that readathon, and I absolutely adored them. There's more, definitely, but I remember mostly... I've been watching Rachel's content since the beginning I'd say she's probably my favorite booktuber. So she's recommended me the most of my favorites, but there's definitely others. Thank you for that question, Dip the Guitarist. Next up, Kathleen. Kathleen asks, congratulations on 5,000. What is the scariest non-fiction book you have ever read? And I would have to say Che Guevara by John Lee Anderson. This is a book about the acclaimed, or the well-known rebel Che Guevara, who all through Latin America, he and Castro started a revolution, overthrowing a lot of the governments that were American supported at the time. And the reason why this book scared me the most is because Che's main goal was to take his war to America one day, and he wanted to like blow up cities and stuff, and all in the cause of creating a communist world, which not isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself, but the way he wanted to bring it about was through war and violence. And he was a very angry person, and had his plans saw fruition, our world today may have been very different. And I think more realistic things scare me more than fictional monsters. So this question is very suited, the nonfiction books. And there was also a nonfiction book I read about Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. They were basically a serial killer wife and husband who killed 2 teenage girls close to where I live, about 2 hours drive away. And the thing is with that book, I can't remember the title. Lethal Marriage, it's called. The thing about that is that they recorded the torturing that they did of these young women. And this book, Lethal Marriage, has the transcripts from these videos, and it's absolutely horrific. It's awful. So there's 2 questions there's 2 books to that one question. Thank you, Kathleen, for asking. Civoreb says, congratulations on 5,000. Thank you. And their question is, what is a criminally underrated horror author you recommend that people can't go wrong with? And I've been asked this before, and I've talked about this author already. I have to say Tim Curran, because as I said earlier, nobody creates monsters like him. If you want an example of this, go read his book Dead Sea. It's filled with some of the most unique and honestly kind of scary monsters you will ever come across. It's a Bermuda Triangle type story, and I would have to say that that book also scared me. The biggest problem I have with that book is that it has a very long, sort of meandering middle part. The book is a little bit too longer than it should be, I think, but it's ultimately very effective, and it showcases Tim Curran's imagination so well. I think that you get a good idea of what type of monsters he's able to create, because I've seen him create things similar in other books. Well, not similar, but the idea that he can create very unique monsters, and effectively scary monsters at that. So definitely Tim Curran. He's an indie writer, and I don't see enough people talking about him. Big Bad Wolf asked first. He says, hi Jason, and congrats. Thank you. And he says he remembers me saying something about Caitlin or Kiernan and the 5 of Cups. Why is this book so expensive and hard to get? If it is a gruesome vampire read, which I and others love or even covet, why is this not re-released? Also, I'd love to see you do a video on vampire novels, but not the mainstream novels, and be well. Thank you. I may do a vampire video at some point because I love vampires, but he's talking right now about this book here, The 5 of Cups. And first off, there's a funny story to me answering this question, because I answered the question in the comments, not thinking it was actually attached to this video, because I was using my cell phone, the app, and I just saw the question. I was like, oh, that's a good question. So I just decided to answer it. And then later I realized it was part of this, Q&A. It's like, brain fart moment. But anyways, this book was released by, I'll answer it again here. This book was released by Subterranean Press, and a lot of their books don't last in print because they're sort of specialty made books, and they're usually very beautifully created books. Here's the back cover, front cover, the spine. This one, I don't know if it was numbered, but I did get it signed. And the thing with this book is it is numbered. It's 422. So Subterranean Press does a lot of these where they only make like 1,000 books or 500 books. And this was actually Caitlin R. Kiernan's first written novel. Her first published novel was Silk. And Five of Cups went on to be unpublished. And I guess she gave it to Subterranean as a submission, and by then she had 2 or 3 books out, and they're like, you know what, we'll do one of our, typical limited signed copies. And I was a fan of Caitlin R. Kiernan's when she did this, and so I was one of the ones who bought it. It was like $50 or something like that at the time, and I don't do this too often, but I had to do this because I wanted to read all of Caitlin R. Kiernan's books, and I wanted to read this one, and it's a pretty brutal vampire story. It's basically about how feral being a vampire is. It focuses on the animal instinct of it, and I love it. So that's as to why it hasn't been republished, I don't know. You would think that Caitlin R. Kiernan, she could self-publish it, or she could find somebody else to publish it, but I remember recommending this on a video, and I regretted it soon after because you can't find it anywhere unless you want to pay like $150, $200. It's very rare, and it's very hard to get. I guess that would be very rare. But yeah, so it's very expensive, and so I regretted recommending it on that video because I thought at the time that it was available as an ebook, and maybe it was for a little while, but as to why it's not now, I don't know. But I think there's a demand for Caitlin R. Kiernan books, so I don't know why nobody's publishing some of these that are no longer available. Thank you, Big Bad Wolf. Next up, Goddess of Gore. She says, congratulations on the 5,000. Thank you. I know I asked Crystal the same question, but who is your favorite baddie in any form you deem as a baddie, and why? Okay, I had to think about this one because, I wanted to go with Randall Flagg, but that would be such a typical answer. He's like a badass, in the stand and whatnot. But I think I'm going to go with the bad guy. I can't remember his name right now, in Stephen King's son's book, Nosferatu, because the sort of vampire-like creature that's in that book, Charlie Manx from Nosferatu is definitely my answer for this, because he's not just he's a bad guy. Obviously, he's doing terrible things to kids, but he has an almost human reason as to why he's doing it, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. And that impressed me because most often you find books where, especially in horror, where you have like the big bad villain guy, they're just villains, and there's almost no reason for them to be a villain. They're just a monster, they're a demon or an alien, whatever, and they're just doing what they do. But Charlie Manx has a mission, and he thinks he's doing right by these children instead of what he's actually doing, which is abusing and harming them. And I found that interesting, an interesting twist. It doesn't make Charlie Manx likable by any means, but you can kind of understand him at least a little bit. And I find that actually kind of rare in horror, where you can actually maybe not sympathize, but understand where the bad guy's coming from, while still hating him. All right, Priscilla. Priscilla's, everyone who makes booktube videos knows who Priscilla is, and she's been commenting on my videos for a very long time. Thank you, Priscilla. She says, congratulations on 5,000 subscribers. Thank you. My question is, what are you working on now writing-wise? And P.S. She says she enjoyed my story and Lurking in the Dark. Thank you, Priscilla. And unfortunately, I'm not really working on anything right now. There's a novella I've written like 2 drafts of, and I'm sort of kicking around still. I would love to be able to complete that. It's definitely a piece of weird fiction. I'm not too sure when that's going to happen. And there's also a short story collection that I want to get out. I have one out already, but I want another one out, and I just don't know when I'm going to be. I have the stories, I just need to edit them, and that's what takes the longest, I find, and it's the most difficult part. So hopefully there's something else. So there's maybe a chapbook of a themed sort of storyline that I found myself writing, and I just need to write one more story for it, and then you might see that as a chapbook and an audiobook. But there's no promises because, like I said, I tend to prioritize booktube and reading way too much in terms of my writing. My writing often takes a back seat where, 5-10 years ago it always took a first seat. And I don't know why that is, but I would like to get the writing back into being in that first seat again. I think honestly, in order to do that, I need to find a new job, one that's not so demanding. All right, Rio Madre, hope I pronounced that right, asks or says, "Woohoo, this is awesome. Congratulations. I love your channel. So glad it's growing. Thank you." And she goes on to ask, "I always love to know what if other people have unique rituals they do when reading or starting a new book, etc." I don't really. The biggest ritual is honestly going through reviews and see what other people thought about the book before I start it. Something I really enjoy doing. I try to avoid spoilers. Like if they start talking about the plot too much, then I might skip it. But basically, I want to know how much they enjoyed it, and I think what I'm doing there is I'm trying to gather their enthusiasm for the book, because enthusiasm makes me enthusiastic. So that's the biggest ritual. And she goes on to say, or maybe, what was the horror book that began your love of reading horror? And that was definitely Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon. And also, I love hearing about booktubers' favorite booktubers. It definitely Rachel from the Shades of Orange. I also love Lydia from Typical Books. My mind always goes blank when this question is asked. I really enjoy Crystal from Fiber Artsy Reads. I think that she and I have similar reading tastes, but she reads a lot more than I do. I mean, a lot more, and that's great. I love that. And Mike's book reviews, I enjoy watching his videos. He has a lot of great recommendations. Especially if I'm in the mood for fantasy, I'll generally head on over to his channel to look for recommendations. There's so many booktubers that I watch. I wish I could answer more, but I think those are the ones I frequent the most these days. I used to watch a lot more booktube than I do today. I still watch a lot of booktube, but just not as much. There is a couple more, but I'm just going to leave it at that. I like those the most. All right, thank you. I think that was the last question from Rio. Yes, thank you for asking that, Rio. Nicholas Kaufman, who's been a guest on my show a couple of times, and I'm looking forward to having him on again. He says, "Congrats on reaching 5,000 subscribers." Thank you, Nicholas. My question is, what are some of the joys and challenges you've discovered when it comes to running a booktube channel? Well, the biggest one is time. Time, I think, affects everything. You wish you had like 48 hours in one day. So you could get all the sleep you need and do all the things you want to do. But definitely time, especially in the last couple of years. My job has been ramping up certain things, and I just feel so much more exhausted, even on my days off sometimes. So time is definitely a big issue. Other challenges are just more mindset. Sometimes I've just not been into it. Like last year, 2022 was a bad year for me. I barely filmed any videos. I was lucky to get a video out a month. where I like to keep it at least once a week. And I found similar challenges, but for different reasons this year. Like after I posted the 5,000 Q&A video asking for questions, I wanted to do them much sooner than I did. But this is the only time actually I ran into any time issues. But the mindset thing is not just about, being depressed or whatever. Sometimes I did go through a period where I was stuck on, and this goes to a previous question too, about the 1,000 subscribers, the person who wants to reach 1,000 subscribers. I got latched onto the idea I wanted to grow my channel as quickly as possible. And so I started watching all the YouTube growth channels on YouTube. People who tell you how to grow your channel and quickly, and I kind of got obsessed with like statistics and all that stuff, and that drained me more than anything else, and I had to cut all that back. I had to say, you know what, let's take it to where I started, and that is just me sitting here when I have the time to talk about books, the books that I'm reading, the books that I enjoy the most, with anyone who's willing to watch. And honestly, I think that's better. That's better. Like, my channel kind of went really down in subscriber count. It stopped growing when I started paying attention to all that stuff and playing around with thumbnails and all that stuff. And then when I started having fun making videos again, my channel started to grow again. So I still watch those videos on occasion, but I can't take them too seriously. I'm on my own journey here, and they all say that too. Like, everyone's journey is different, and their advice is just advice. So you gotta take it with a grain of salt and maybe accommodate what works for you. At least that's what I've learned. So those are the biggest challenges, the whole mind games you tend to play with yourself versus time. The time, if I could, I'd probably make a lot more videos. But definitely those are the two of the biggest challenges. And the joys are just making the videos and talking with people in the comments. One reason why I make the videos and have so much fun doing it is because I have absolutely nobody in my life I can just sit here and go on about books about. I do have my wife, Jen, but she doesn't like the books I like. So there's something missing. I could talk to her all day about this book that I'm enjoying, but she's only listening because I'm her husband, and she has no interest in the book otherwise. And she would listen. She used to ask me about the books I read all the time, and she doesn't anymore because there is that divide. She reads a lot of books too, but she reads in different genres. And every once in a while we do talk about the books we enjoy to each other, and I like that. But it's not the same as talking to even if it's invisible in a sense, because I'm just looking at my own reflection here on my phone as I record this. But there's going to be comments in regards to the books I talk about, and that's just me talking about the books is one joy I have, and then conversing about the books that I'm talking about in the comments are definitely the joys that I get. Thank you, Nicholas, and as I said, I'm looking forward to having you on the on the channel again soon. And M's Book Nook says, congratulations, thank you. And she says, what's the weirdest read you remember from childhood or your teenage years? Honestly, the weirdest read, I can't answer that because I didn't get into weird fiction until I was in my 20s. All the fiction that I read when I was in my teens was pretty normal stuff, except for Edgar Allan Poe. So I'd have to go with Edgar Allan Poe, because stories like the Telltale Heart and the Cat's Eye, it's not called the Cat's Eye, the Black Cat, stories like that really kind of shocked me because they're so old and yet so spooky in a sense. But like I said, in my first really travel into weird fiction was H.P. Lovecraft, and that answers the next question, which she'd also love to know what sparked my love of weird fiction. I've always enjoyed when writers play around with reality and explore reality and consciousness. And H.P. Lovecraft didn't necessarily do that, but he did in a sense. And I went through a phase in my mid-20s to 30s, somewhere in there, where I wanted to read all of H.P. Lovecraft's stories. And I did. And I did that along with a podcast, the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, which I believe is still available, but they've changed their format after they went through all the H.P. Lovecraft stories. But I think those old late H.P. Lovecraft stories are still available. But I was listening to them as they were putting out their episodes. So I would read the story. They would say on their website or whatever, or at the end of the podcast, what story they were reading next. I think they went chronologically. And I followed along with them. And it was just a blast because they bring a bit of an academic approach to H.P. Lovecraft stories. And they hated on H.P. Lovecraft where it was necessary, i.e. where he's being a racist douche in his stories. But they focused mostly on their love of his imagination and the things he created. And it was just such an interesting ride for me. And from there, I went on to read a lot more classic weird fiction from like M.R. James and Algernon Blackwood and all of those guys. And you know what, to actually go back to your first question, I have to say Clive Barker, because I read the Books of Blood, and those stories are pretty strange too, even though they're not classified as weird fiction. And she also says, thank you for hosting the Week of Weird with Crystal. You two opened up a whole new world for me, and you're quite welcome. I'm so glad that I was able to help Crystal in helping others bring weird fiction into their lives, because I think weird fiction adds certain things. I think weird fiction is mostly for people who want to be floored by wonder and awe, and I am definitely one of those people who I crave to be floored by wonder and awe. And that's what weird fiction tends to do, at least the weird fiction I enjoy the most. All right, I believe that those are all the questions. I want to thank everyone again for asking, and here's to another 5,000. Cheers with my coffee, my Nightcrawler coffee. And keep being safe and keep being creative. And I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.